Would you let Jeffrey Epstein watch your kids? Didn't think so. What about his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell? Hard pass. So why trust him? Mark Carney, Maxwell's friend, not yours.
Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show, second take. This is week one of the election. It already feels like it's a month in. I don't know if you're sick of it yet. I'm kind of getting there, but I can't let myself get totally sick of it because, of course, we're going to be covering this for 4 more weeks. Well, we've been eager and pushing and wanting to see this election come. I guess we shouldn't complain about it now that it's finally here. And boy, it's not going in a direction a lot of conservatives would have hoped for or expected. But we'll see. It's the early days. We're going to run down through some of that and what's been going on in the campaign and what to look forward to. And as every Friday, we're going to cover this and go through a number of issues, polls, other such things. And it's interactive. I see Jester in the comments scroll already. Yes, get on there. Send your comments, send your questions, send things to my guests, to me. I see them all. I don't necessarily react to them all, but I do see them, and it keeps things moving and keeps things rolling. Just keep them civil, of course. Sometimes I've seen some crazy fights breaking out in there. So in a little bit, I've got a number of guests coming on today. Michael Nightafor, we're going to talk about electric vehicles. You know, nobody's talked about corporate welfare or some of the crazed net zero policies yet in this campaign. As I said, it's only week one. Maybe they'll get to it, but let's break the ground on that now because the electric vehicle market seems to have kind of fallen apart, hasn't it? But we're still stuck with the bill. Also, I'm going to have Chris Oldcorn. He's our bureau chief in Saskatchewan, and he's going to give us the outlook on the election out there on the wind-swept prairie zone of Saskatchewan, see what's happening out that way and what their view is on things coming up. And then after that, I'm going to have Frances Widdowson come on. She's a former professor from Mount Royal University in Calgary who has been outspoken on some of the Indigenous issues, particularly the residential school, well, the Kamloops, 215 bodies that don't exist. She dared to question that, and of course, she's got kicked out of her school and is paid a price for that, but she's still very outspoken and hasn't given up on it. So, to get things rolling, we'll start and run down on the news and what's been happening with our news editor, Dave Naylor, and cover the week that was so far in the election.
Quiet, nothing going on, Cory.
No.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
Okay. We can talk about Rachel Gilmore for a while. There's always comic relief there.
Yeah, comic relief. So, well, let's start the chat with some, I guess, breaking news within the last couple hours. President Trump has talked to Prime Minister Carney, and Trump issued a statement on Truth Social saying, very productive. Didn't call anybody names, didn't call Carney the governor, said extremely productive, and he's looking forward to meeting, right after the election. Which is, I thought, that was a bit presumptuous, wasn't it, that Carney's going to win?
Very much so. And it's strange, that's this unusual factor that, we've watched a number of elections in our time. Never so much when it's relied on an outside, unpredictable influence on the whole thing. Like, how would now that impact support for Carney? Would it make it look more solid in that people would think Carney might be able to calm down this crazy trade war, or will it harm his outlook because, hey, well, if Trump likes him, I can't like him?
I think you can just see it in the polls that it's favoring Carney.
So far.
Just the fact that Trump didn't insult him, Carney would have had to be breathing a deep sigh of relief. And it, to be honest, it looks good that he can almost control, so to speak, Donald Trump, even though nobody can, but calm down Donald Trump. But the other thing it's done is it's taken him off the campaign trail, right? So he gets to go act all prime ministerial and doesn't have to do any campaigning where he's exposed to that nasty media that he doesn't like dealing with. So how long he'll stay behind closed doors, I guess, remains to be seen. But It couldn't have come along at a better time. I guess fortunately for Conservatives, it's happened early. As you say, we're only a week into it. Long time in politics, and still a month to go. Anything can happen, but right now the polls are all favoring Carney.
Yeah, well, it's trending that people really have to watch for in polls as opposed to where things sit. And boy, those trends, I'm going to go over the polls a little later, and those numbers are stark, and they aren't changing. That trend continues. It's hard to stop that train once it starts moving.
Yeah, even crazy Frank Graves has Polyev losing his seat. Which I don't believe for a second.
No, that's still the outlier, but I mean, everybody else is agreeing that there's definitely been a...
Yeah, but I'm seeing a couple of polls where the gap is narrowing. It's not a 15-point lead for Carney. It's a 4 or 5 point lead. So, there's still hope there. Oh. Probably as we speak now, Polyev is in Nanaimo. He's doing his big crime thing today, where he's going to lock up gun smugglers for life. He's going to lock up fentanyl dealers for life. So he's really going to get tough on crime. He started the week in Ontario with large rallies, thousands and thousands of people, lineups for blocks long. So despite what the polls are saying, there's still some excitement. When you get that big a rally in Toronto, that's in southern Ontario, that's unusual. And then as he moved west, they had a huge rally last night in Surrey, like 5,500 people. Poor Jared, our reporter, had to park miles away because he couldn't even get parking space.
He's young. He can do the walk.
You know what he does for the weekend? Like, he walks like 50 kilometers in a day. Like,
on purpose?
On purpose. Yeah, he goes and, he lives in downtown Vancouver. He goes and visits his parents in, like, Burnaby, and he walks. He's a bit nuts, that guy?
No, we need that kind of nut out there.
But he does have nice hair. You got to admit that.
Absolutely. I mean, we can only envy it. But once he starts getting into our, 50s and such, we'll see how that holds out.
Exactly. So after today, Polyev flies to Winnipeg, and they'll be holding a press conference tomorrow and a rally tomorrow afternoon in Winnipeg, and our Jen Hodgson will be covering that. So stay tuned for that.
It's interesting with Nanaimo, though, picking for justice. I mean, that's a city that, if people aren't familiar with the West or familiar with Vancouver Island, I mean, Vancouver Island's beautiful, and those cities and the coastline and everything, but Nanaimo, to be blunt, is a shithole.
Yeah, that's not the nicest of places.
It's gone really rough, a lot due to the epidemic of opioid addiction and so on the island. But there's been a lot of stories over the years of frustrated citizens, with that light on crime, with that enablement thing in BC. I mean, East Hastings, everybody thinks of, but they don't think of Nanaimo. And that's an area that I think the citizens will respond to a tough on crime.
And not even Nanaimo. Go to Victoria and look at all the homeless people and the drug epidemic there. It's out of control. And I think this is what Polyev has to do. He's lost the Trump battle. Let's give that to Carney. But now he's got to start hammering issues like crime, like he's doing today, and hopefully that'll get more people's attention and back on his campaign and thinking, the last 10 years have been kind of rough. So, but let's spare a tear for Jagmeet.
Oh yes,
poor Jagmeet.
I forgot he was in there.
Yeah, he's in southern Ontario, but he's got, because they can't afford a plane, he's got like 6-hour bus rides between events. And I think he had an event in Ontario where less than 20 people showed up. I just hope he's using these 6-hour bus rides to work on his resignation speech and just get it down perfect.
He's certainly an also ran. I mean, that's another factor aside from the Trump factor, though. That's really, I mean, the Liberals, the stars are just lining up for them.
Yeah.
And the absolute collapse of the NDP under Singh. I mean, in the days when Jack Layton was there, well, that really came at a hard price for the Liberal Party. But now that Singh has pretty much obliterated his own party, the Liberals are the beneficiaries of this.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some polls that have them down to like winning 2 or 3 seats. It looks good on them, keeping Trudeau in power all those years. Couldn't happen to a nicer party.
Well, I think that's part of it, right? I mean, so much time he was hand in hand with Trudeau throughout. Then people were saying, well, if it's the same darn thing, I might as well vote for the Liberals that put Liberal on their name rather than somebody who pretends to be something else.
So I think probably by the end of April, we'll be seeing him drive off into the sunset in his Maserati.
Yeah,
and Rolexes and $1,000 rockers or whatever he had when he was having his baby. So.
Maserati Marxist, yes.
Yes. Well. So that was a quiet week in politics, Cory, and I'm sure it'll be the same next week.
Well, yeah, we'll see what pops up. All right. Well, thanks for the update. I'll let you back into the newsroom to carry on trying to search for stories amidst that blight of.
Yes, not difficult to find them these days, that's
All
for
right.
sure.
Right on. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Ray.
All right. So, yes, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And as you heard, though, there is a lot to cover. I mean, not just electoral. We cover stuff from all over. I mean, there was a horrific earthquake, unfortunately, in Asia. There's a terrible video of a office building that was half constructed and the earthquake hit and the thing collapsed. It's just terrible. You know, obviously, there were people working within that thing and trying to get it built at the time in Thailand. It's one of the things of modern media, unfortunately. We see things like we never used to in real time. And, so it doesn't worry. We get too inured to it, right? You know, you when I grew up reading newspapers, watching TV, you didn't quite see the blood, the gore, the bodies of things as they happen. And social media comes to you unfiltered. I don't know if that's a great development. Should we bury our heads in the sand to rough things or not? Either way, we do cover everything and stuff all over. As I said, we have a busy newsroom. You can see it back there behind me. This is what I like to remind you. The reason we have that newsroom, the reason we're covering these things, and be sure to tune in on election night. Of course, we will be having a special covering those results as they come in with a number of guests and just live coverage so you can see who is going to be Canada's next Prime Minister live. The reason we can do it, though, is because you guys have subscribed. We don't take tax dollars. We will not take tax dollars. Most of legacy media does, not us. So get on there, check it out. It's $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. Get past the paywalls, helps support me, our producer, John, our reporters back there, and Dave managing them and the rest of them. It's very important. So those who have subscribed already, thank you very much. We've been doing great, and we appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, come on, guys, get on board. Not to mention, you know, consider sponsorship. I do want to mention quickly New World Precious Metals. Actually, those guys have been fantastic. They're an Alberta-based company. Everybody's talking about buying local. You're worried about the dollar. You're worried about what it's worth. Look at gold and silver, guys. They've gained over 30% just in the last year. Has any of your retirement plans done that? Anything of the sort? Of course not. Precious metals, though, they hold their value. They ride out the rough times. Check them out. Alberta-based company. Diversify your portfolio. Look into getting into precious metals. Just Google them, New World Precious Metals, and see what they can do to help you out. All right. Let's see. You know, I see a commenter there, Douglas... or Doug saying, a diehard conservative, I'm hoping Carney wins, separation gets here sooner. You know, that's going to be an interesting thing as we watch this. If the Liberals make this comeback, if it happens, and they turn this around, you know, from being down at like 17% in the polls to what now, and I'm going to go through the polls in a little while, might even be coming into a majority government again. The rage in the West is going to be something else. I mean, there's kind of been a thing with the West. We've always been uncomfortable with liberal governments who don't get along with them, but it's kind of, you know, that every 10 years or so, it's going to turn over. You'll get a break. You'll get a breather. You'll get a conservative government that'll at least be a little less bad to the West than the Liberals. But here we are, 10 years after one of the worst governments we've ever seen, and it looks like we might be going into a new cycle of another 10 years. People are going to lose it. They are going to have had enough. And I don't know. I don't know. I've been an independent supporter for a long time, but I don't want to wish misery on everybody in order to get there. It's just such a bizarre, unpredictable, divided, weird outlook we've got through this whole election. As well, as Dave said, Carney is, he's been doing the negotiations with Trump. He's been speaking as the prime minister. That's part of his job right now. We don't, just under our system. I don't like where that sits, but that's the truth of it. He kind of switches the hats back and forth. For a while, he's the candidate. For a while, he's the prime minister. You do need, what they call a caretaker government over the course of an election campaign. So that's what he's doing. Cabinet is still there. He still has to meet with Trump. He still has to try and get through this trade war that's messing with everybody. But it's helping him too, right? There's nothing better than looking prime ministerial during a campaign. And again, as I said to Dave, the stars just seem to keep lining up for this party. So it works out great for Carney. He's getting far more support out of playing prime minister rather than on the campaign trail and doing rallies and such. And we could be paying a terrible price for that in a while. Either way, we got to keep reminding people of the record of this government, the record of this party. And my next guest, who's coming right up here, Michael Nidafor, is going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk about electric vehicles. We're going to talk about corporate welfare. We're going to talk about this obsession. So let's bring Michael in and get on to some of that. So how you doing out there?
I'm doing well. Waiting.
All right. Excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming on to talk to us. I've seen you on other shows and interviews talking about this. EVs, they were going to be the great savior. We've listened to 10 years of this. They were going to change the world. They were going to end climate change. They were going to create a great local bustling EV manufacturing economy, battery plants. It all seems to have kind of fallen by the wayside all of a sudden, hasn't it?
Well, it has. I think kind of boil it down to that a lot of people who made these decisions never really treat. And if you're talking about markets, the people who came up with all of this forgot all about it.
Yeah, we're having a bit of connection problems. It's getting difficult to hear you a little bit there. We'll just give it a moment. Hopefully it catches up a little for you there. And but yeah, I mean the EVs. We've seen these battery plants. These were celebrated. The Ontario government, Doug Ford. We've seen Quebec government pumping subsidies into some of them, and of course the federal government, all hand in hand. And none of them seem to have created those jobs, and now they seem to be closing their doors.
Well, exactly what's happened. It was a bad idea to start with, and unfortunately, a lot of dollars to actually come to the realization it's not working.
So, should we be backing out of the EV market, though, then? Should the government disassociate and go from there?
You'll have to repeat. I'm getting a lot of...
Yeah, we're having difficulties hearing you. Perhaps if you could give it a try to log out and in again, we'll see if you can get a better connection. I'm afraid we're having a very difficult time hearing from you there, Michael. Great, thank you. So yeah, getting back to that, while Michael, kind of logs in and out, and hopefully we can sort out those connection issues going on there. Electric vehicles, the apparent savior, though, right? I mean, $50 billion with a B. And not all of that's been spent, but a whole bunch has been committed to these battery plants, these things out in, of course, always Quebec, Ontario. You don't see any Western Canadian manufacturing plants, because that's not a priority for winning the votes, right? But they've partnered with Volkswagen, again, speaking of things that aren't Canadian and so on, and they never got built. Like, this should be, I think, should be almost a forensic investigation following up on these things. What's going on? And not to mention now, the top electric vehicle supplier, the ones that cornered about 25% of the market, was actually Tesla, Elon Musk. And Musk is now on the outs. Nobody likes Teslas any longer. Well, that's the one that broke the most ground for electric vehicles within North America. And then the other ones that were coming in around the world, you're seeing in Mexico, you're seeing in Europe, like them, hate them, whatever, were Chinese-made EVs. And those were starting to build up. Because part of the problem was that EVs weren't affordable. Your average person couldn't get one. They cost much, much more than your average vehicle. Well, China provided affordable ones. Now they could be accused of dumping, perhaps. Maybe they were not valuing them right. I don't know. But Canada jumped on with 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. They said, no, you're going to double the cost of those things if you buy them in Canada. Well, what did you think was going to happen? China has now responded. So to try... They're going after our canola and a lot of things we export to China, which is hurting, guess again, the West. Western farmers are taking a beating to protect an electric vehicle manufacturing market that doesn't actually exist in Canada. What a horrific mess we're in, but we're not hearing about that in this election, are we? Let's bring Michael in and see if perhaps it's a little more clear now. Hey, how you doing, Michael? We got a little more straight connection?
Well, I can hear you. Are you okay with me?
It just keeps breaking up on your audio, I'm afraid. I'm having a very difficult time understanding what you're saying.
Well, it's a technical issue, and I can hear a lot of that on the end as well.
Okay, yeah, and I'm afraid we'll have to try and bring you in another time, Michael. I really appreciate you coming in today, but I'm afraid the listeners just can't quite pick up what you're saying.
Okay, let's reschedule because it's an important topic for sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right. So yeah, that was Michael at Night of Four, and I'm afraid, yeah, we just can't seem to resolve whatever that audio issue is. Sorry about that, guys. Because yeah, I saw him speaking on a different interview, and he had a lot of very good things to say on as he said, a very important issue. All right, well, let's turn a bit here and see. This was the week that was when we get into the election. What they were all talking about, aside from there's a Trump thing, the trade thing, is tax cuts. And it's funny because Carney just does a carbon copy of everything Polyev does, which is really ironic too, because an issue that just broke today from the National Post was, it sounds like Mark Carney, when he did his thesis back in Oxford, years and years ago, at 10 different spots, it appears he might have been plagiarizing for his papers, for his work. When you look at his campaign today, it doesn't seem that surprising at all now, does it? Because it's the same thing. Everything Polyev says, Carney just regurgitates. But what's maddening for Polyev and pretty much any of us watching is it's working. It's working. So Polyev has been saying he's going to cut the capital gains tax increase. Carney says he'll do the same. Polyev says he's going to cut the GST on new homes. Carney says he's going to do the same. Polyev says he's going to cut the income tax for the low-income bracket. Carney says he's going to do the same. Nothing original is coming out of Carney. They're basically just playing follow the leader. But typically when you do that, it doesn't work for you. Typically, the first person out of the gate with those policies will take the credit for it. But this bizarre lineup in Canada, whatever's going on, it's working. It's working. People are saying, well, Carney will do all that. We don't need Polyev. Why, Canada, why are you believing Liberals today when they've lied to you for 10 solid years? I don't understand that. They haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is Carney himself. That the same old cabinet ministers are all running under Carney. In fact, some of them came back, Anita Anand, Fraser, the ones who said, we're going to spend more time with our family, so I'm not going to run again. Ooh, look at that. The polls changed. Suddenly they want to spend more time with their family. Their family must be feeling a little bit abused right now, aren't they? But as a Canadian, I'm sure feeling abused, but it's working. I mean, some of it too. Coconut Lock, one of the commenters, pointing out, CBC is spinning the story. Absolutely. The legacy media and state media are shilling for the Liberals for all they're worth. They are behind and pushing because they're subsidized. The party, the one thing that Carney hasn't said, and it's funny, Polyev has been kind of quiet about that lately, is that Carney will never cut the subsidies to the media. Polyev probably will, and he certainly, he was speaking pretty clearly on defunding the CBC. So they're fighting for their lives, basically, because they don't want to adjust. They don't want to adapt. They don't want to become like us, for example, where we become accountable through subscriptions and advertisers. They just want to get handouts. And the Liberals are the only ones that are going to give them those handouts. So, of course, they're going to favorably cover the Liberals. We talked a little bit about this in a past show. One of the commenters brought it up. Then I'll bring up the polls in a moment. With why, with the thing that was interesting is the demographic that's switching. It's the young people who are still supporting the Conservatives. Like, it's totally topsy-turvy. It used to always be Conservatives were the home for older Canadians, older voters, and Liberals were the home for the left-wing, progressive-type voters. And now it's the conservative older voters have all gone to the Liberals for some bloody reason. Part of it is that the older Canadians still watch the older media. They don't go to the Western Standard or True North or some of the other alternatives online, the independent outlets. They still watch CTV, CBC, Global. So they're getting all their news from that slant. They're getting that filtered pro-liberal news coverage. And it's impacting them and it's keeping them, younger people, they get their news online. They've changed, they've adapted. So strangely, we've got this flip around, but this should be very, very concerning for the Conservatives too. Because you see, one of the reasons that when polling comes in, often Conservatives get a better result than the polling will hint. Part of it's because the Conservative supporters were more inclined to get out to vote. It's one thing to respond in a poll saying, I would vote for this, I would vote for that. But if it's a lot of youth who actually, oh, geez, there's a good party on tonight, I'm not going to bother going out to vote. Older people tend to get off their butts and go out and vote, so it gets better represented at the polls. Well, when the older people are now supporting the Liberals, the youth of the Conservative base, the Conservatives have got that much more to be worried about. And so I'm going to bring up the polls here in a couple of images. One is from Abacus data. They've been, and this is bad news, guys, they've been the ones showing the least amount of support for the Liberal Party all the way throughout. But even they, you know, have to admit, now they've actually shown the Liberals have pulled into the lead. Look at that trend line, that red line that went from 20% all the way up now, almost doubled to 38%. And remember, this is the most modest projection of where the Liberals are sitting. You can see the Conservatives, they peaked at 46% and have dropped now down to the 38%, 8-9 point drop, which again mostly went to the bloody Liberals. And the other part, as I was talking with Dave about, is that yellow line you can see at the bottom. That is the NDP, and they are just cratering. And this poll down to 11%. Again, NDP voters who are disenchanted are not going to go Conservative. They go Liberal. We're actually seeing a strategic vote in action, and that doesn't happen that often, realistically, actually. People talk about strategic voting, but often they'll vote with their heart or with the local policies or things like that. They won't take it so much, I'm going to vote for this just to keep them out, even though I like this party better. That's what's happening. The NDP voters, the traditional NDP voters, tend to like the NDP, but they're saying, I'm scared Poilievre's going to come in and he's going to, you know, cut my welfare payments or whatever it might be. So thus, I will switch my vote to the Liberals just to keep that from happening. It's a negative reason to vote, but it's what they are doing, and it's working. And now I'll get a little scarier, I'm afraid. I'll go to the CBC poll tracker, and that one is a seat projection. And so this is where they kind of chew through the results. This gets a little more difficult to figure out what's happening with, but you work it because, you know, ridings by ridings can mess with things. But what they are seeing, and as you see that kind of faded line around the top, that's the majority level. That's the 100-seat level. That's winning a full government. And the Liberals, look at that red line down below. Look where they were sitting. They were sitting at like 10, 12 seats just back in January, just a month and a half ago. They are now looking 2 seats into a majority, stronger than they even were going into the election. This is terrifying. And again, look at the Conservative plummet. That is putting them below a majority level. This is scary stuff. Even the Bloc is dipping, and that's scary. Again, the Liberals, everything is lining up for them. This is a perfect storm of Liberal hell approaching us, guys. The bottom lines you can see there, that's the Green, or not the Green Party, the NDP and the Bloc, both cratering, again, to the benefit of the Liberals. If things do not change dramatically, we're looking at a Liberal majority. Unimaginable only a month and some ago. I've never seen anything quite like it. I'll just show one more poll because it's kind of the same all over, but it's Main Street. And they were kind of in the middle of things, you know. Again, Frankie Graves of the Ecos, yeah, he's crazy. His polls are really unreliable. But, you know, these Main Street and Abacus and others, you can't dismiss them. And we're looking at 44% for Carney now, 41% for the Conservatives. It sounds like a small difference, but that's the difference between a majority government and a minority. And these trends, you know, it looked like it was outliers. It looked like it was side things, but there's just too many pollsters reporting the same thing. Even Doug Ford, somebody dug out internals. You know, that's where you get your best polls. I talked about that in a previous show. The best polls tend to come from internal party polling because they actually just want to know what it is. They won't necessarily release them, but they want to know what's going on out there. And Doug Ford's own internal polling, somebody leaked that out, and it showed the Liberals are getting poised for just again a wipeout in Ontario. They are going to clean up the seats out there. Whether or not that changes in the West, I don't know. You see, some of these are a little nuts, and that's where you wonder about the seat projections. Because, I mean, one of them called for 5 seats to be won in Alberta. I mean, Alberta's got a few spots. We've got 2 Liberal seats. Both Liberal MPs went down in disgrace. We got Chahal, who's non-affectionately known as the porch pirate, in one of them, and we've got the Randys, up north. He's not running again. Randy Boisenall, who just again went down in scandal. But those 2 seats still might go Liberal again, and they might gain 1 or 2 in parts of Edmonton. Maybe another 1 seat in Calgary. What's going on? So I'm looking forward to Chris Oldcorn when he gets here. And that's a little while yet. Okay, we've got some time to go here. Realizing now when my schedule gets thrown. So we're looking at not 5 seats in Alberta. Saskatchewan's got 0 seats going on right now for the Liberals. Will that change? I don't know. Chris will probably let us know as we discuss things when we get rolling on stuff. Kenzie Kraken, one of the commenters, saying, funny that the rallies don't support those polls. Yeah, what the rallies are showing, and there's truth to it, is Poilievre is showing up at places. Dave mentioned a couple of those. Thousands of people are coming out and they're waving the signs, and it's showing energy, and it looks good. But you've got to remember, 5,000 people in a city of a couple of million aren't much. Those are the party loyal. It shows good ground organization. It shows a party that knows how to campaign. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate to votes. You still got to keep doing it, absolutely. But we can't read into these rallies as well. We got to remember as well. I mean, here's another factor that I know some people speak of is Maxime Bernier's People's Party, which just sits down there at 2-3%, doesn't seem to change. He held some huge rallies a few years ago. They really rode the wave of discontent, particularly with the COVID restrictions. And people were certainly looking for alternatives, and that brought it up into more of the double-digit support in some places, 10, 12, but still never concentrated in one spot enough to possibly win a seat. But they held some very, very big rallies as well, but it didn't translate to a seat. And the thing that's happening right now, the thing that's changing everything, that's helping, is being able to, it's the Trump factor. E. Sharp, a commenter, saying Trump's offer sounds good. Just saying. I don't know if you're talking about the 51st state thing. Perhaps you are. To some people, they think the 51st state thing sounds good. Fair enough. And I've had a lot of discussion with individuals about that in the last while. I've been an independent supporter for a long time. I mean, I wrote a book on it, literally. But the 51st state thing has always been a fringe thing, even within the independence movement. And I think a lot of people, there's some people very strongly want to go that route. But I'm just going to spitball and throw it out here right now. Even though it brought it into the discussion, we've seen it more since Trump started all that stuff, that discussion about a 51st state thing. We've seen it more in the last month than we've seen in the last decade. But in reality, if you held a referendum tomorrow in Alberta about the 51st state, I would be shocked if more than 15% of people said yes. Shocked. Independence, maybe we're looking at 30 or 40. It's not there yet, but it's a stronger base. I've talked about that. I went on a speaking tour with the Alberta Prosperity Project all over Alberta. We were giving speeches. I'll just tell this story again because it's important. And we go to rooms anywhere from 30 people to sometimes a few hundred people. And Dr. Dennis Modry, and he's going out with that delegation on the Alberta 51 thing or whatever. And he would always start. He was always the first speaker. And he'd like to poll the room. And he'd just do the straw poll to get everybody to raise their hands. And this is, again, a very independence-leaning room already. And he would say, okay, everybody, we know you're here because you're not happy with things where they're sitting right now. So what's your vision of independence, though? And he said, raise your hands, be honest, everybody. So the first one he'd say, is what about Alberta gaining a little more independence but still staying within the United Canada? And there'd be a handful of hands that go up. They just want some more provincial independence, but they don't really want to step out the door. Okay. And he'd say, what about having nothing change? Of course, nobody in the room would say anything. What about full independence for Alberta? And, most of the room's hands would go up, or a lot of hands. And then what about a combination of Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC? Okay, that would go up. And then he would ask about, what about joining the United States? And seriously, it was only 2 or 3 hands would go up in a room typically. It was a minority of the bunch. There were some there, always were, and that's fine. I think that number's gone up, but to a tipping point where it could be won in a referendum, I find it very unlikely and very hard to believe. And there's just way too many variables going on. Wilder was a commenter saying, I'd rather, similar idea there, I'd rather Alberta be independent and sovereign, but if my only choice is Canada States, I'd go American. Okay, like people are discontent in general. Kenzie Kraken pointing out, I saw a poll showing independence at 40%. That's as high as pretty much it's ever been. Now, you got to understand the difference between a poll and actually voting for something. So, I ran under an independence banner in a couple of elections. And I learned some things while doing it. I wasn't under illusion I was going to win a seat, but we were trying to get a message out and we're doing things. But even then, when I ran, polling was getting 20, 30%, especially that first time I ran. It was getting pretty high. And some of our candidates with the Alberta Independence Party, this is, 25 years ago, the independence movement was pretty strong at that time. And none of our candidates did better than, I think our top candidate was 8%, even though the polls were showing 30, 40%. Because people change their mind when it comes to actually marking their ballot where it matters. It's one thing when a pollster calls and you're ticked off about something and something really worked you up. You say, yes, I'm supporting independence. But when they actually mark that, when they commit, when it's real, it's going to be lower than what the polls are. So if people want to see independence, and I'm among them, got to be patient because it's not there yet. You want those polls before you even, some people say, we've got to go to a referendum now. All right, if you want to set the independence movement back 10 years, hold a referendum now, because that'll do it, because you'll get slaughtered. And you won't get a chance for another one for a long time after that. You've got to make sure you've got an organized base. You've got to be ready to roll. So, and then you start splitting that up, and that's where it gets more difficult too. Well, does independence mean joining the states? Does independence mean being fully independent? A lot of those questions come up. Amir commenting saying, I don't see the downside for Alberta becoming a state. You'll get the Constitution. You can't put a price on that. There's good and bad with the American system. And as I said before, I love the United States. I want to be closer to the United States. I'd like to see it being nearly borderless. I want to see real free trade. But keep that in mind then. Look at the person we're dealing with down there. He's anything but that. He wants to put up more trade barriers. We're trading one set of problems for another set of problems. Alberta would be a smaller fish in a bigger pond. We got a lot of resources, certainly. But there's a lot of other challenges. The American Electoral College is a gong show. Don't assume that all of those things would necessarily be a benefit in joining the states. But again, what I'm saying with this discussion is you're putting the cart way beyond, the horse here when it comes to that discussion at this point, because we're nowhere near that tipping point. But what you can do is start splitting up your own support among different factions. There's nothing conservatives, particularly independence-minded ones, like doing more than fighting with themselves, than fighting with each other. And, there's the worst of the bunch are independence-minded ones, right? These are people who don't want to get along with each other. Louise Laborne saying, we used to like shopping in the United States with a driver's license. Now we're here. Yeah, I remember when you didn't need a passport even to go into the USA. And now President Trump's talking about making people register almost like a visa system if you're going to spend more than 30 days down there. We've got millions of Canadians who spend time in the wintertime down in the States, the snowbird. This is not a good time to be getting closer to them, I'm afraid. I want to be closer, but this is not a welcoming atmosphere. A lot of people also make the leap that the Americans want Canada or Alberta to be the 51st state. That's a giant assumption. And we're not seeing a lot of evidence of that. Their consent is going to have to come in on this as well. If we were going to try and come closer to the USA, we need to be doing it incrementally. We need to be bringing down trade barriers. We need to be going back to, like Louise said, to the days where you didn't even need a passport to cross that border. Instead, we're going the opposite direction. Bruce Leslie saying an Alberta Independence Act should be introduced so we can have it in the future. So along those lines, Alberta or any other province, is we need real legislation for referenda and for recall. This is one of the baits and switches that happen. This is when I got really upset with Premier Kenney years ago when Jason Kenney was the premier. because he promised legislation where citizens can initiate binding referendums and for recall. So they made that promise to do it, and then they dragged their feet in actually bringing in the legislation. It took them years to bring it in. And when they brought it in, they made it useless. They set ridiculous bars for these referendums to be held, for them to even get rolling. If you want a referendum on independence, you need to round up hundreds of thousands of signatures over the course of, I believe it's like 90 days. And if people think that's easy or doable, they've never actually petitioned before. Online petitions, sure, I could put a petition out on X and I could probably get a few thousand signatures for damn near anything within a few hours. But those aren't worth anything. They're digital signatures on an online poll. A real petition, the ones for things like referenda and recall, you have to have it on paper. You have to have it witnessed. You have to go to the door and get them to sign, and they got to provide their address and a phone number. Even a very, very skilled petitioner, good one at the door and everything else, you are lucky if they could get 100 signatures a day. That's a lot of work. Now, there's only so many people who would have the time to put in 8 hours a day, be that talented, and be able to get 100 signatures a day on that sort of form. Kenzie Kraken pointing out, look what happened in Calgary when they tried to recall Gondek. Yeah, it was a huge movement, huge. And I believe, hundreds, if not thousands of people volunteered and went out and got signatures and tried. Two things happened. For one, they were way, way, way short of the threshold. Even with all of that movement to recall her, they couldn't get it. Plus, the electoral officer looked at it, and I guess they didn't dot an I properly on their initial forms or something with the declaration. They said, well, none of these would have been valid even if you had enough signatures. You need to set a bar. It's fair enough. You don't want somebody trying to recall a politician the day after they got elected. You don't want a constant turmoil and turnover and everything else going on with that. But at the same time, you want to make it achievable. It's got to be realistic. So we need legislation, whether or not it's an act, as the commenter said, I don't know. But you need something that for, I don't think specifically for independence, but you need it for the referendum initiative and recall. So where do we go? Kenzie saying Cory Green saying this election's an IQ test. And that's, I'm tempted to keep saying the same things. If you watch me on X, I say similar stuff all the time and everything. Because what's going on is I am wondering, what is the matter with Canadians? Really, how are you getting the wool pulled over your eyes so heavily right now? You've had 10 years of terrible government. Terrible. I mean, I don't fault people for putting in the Trudeau government in 2016. Fair enough. You wanted change, you brought it in, maybe even the next term after that. But look at the record. Are people actually going to look at the policies? Are they going to look at the record? Are they going to look at the fact that the debt has doubled? Are they going to look at our debt, GDP per capita ratio and how it's basically hasn't even grown over the last 10 years, whereas the rest of the world has carried on? Our productivity as a nation, our unity, are we unified? No, we're here talking about independence more than we've ever seen in decades, thanks to 10 years of this government. The woke crap, the subsidies, the corporate welfare. I mean, find a list of successes to point at from the Trudeau government. Where are they? Where are they? Yet, here we are. All it took was changing the person at the head, and suddenly it looks like Canadians are ready to give him a majority. I mean, I can understand. I like Poilievre. Fair enough. I'm biased. That's my job. That's what I do. But I understand a lot of people don't. He doesn't rub them the right way. They don't feel comfortable with him. Fair enough. Not everybody is for everybody. But look at the bigger picture. And again, he would just be the leader of a party, of course, of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of members of Parliament. And look at the policies he's talking about. I mean, give him a term. Give it 4 years. I mean, is there really anything to lose at that point? Especially when Poilievre and Carney are both offering the same bloody policies over and over again. They're indistinguishable. And no, we want to go back to liberal. I mean, Wild Rose saying it's the handouts they're addicted to. There's some of that, equalization, things like that. Eastern Canada, the Maritimes, again, they're heavily liberal supporting, because any party that dares to talk about cutting any of those things, well, and unfortunately, it turns into electoral suicide, political suicide, and it's really, really problematic. All right, I've been rambling for quite a while, but I see Chris Oldcorn in the lobby there. We will pop him in for a chat and see what's happening out there in the real center of Canada, Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
It's good. How are you? How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah, we haven't had you on quite a while. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess just to begin with, just to remind everybody, you're our Saskatchewan bureau chief. You kind of cover a lot of Manitoba issues and things going on out there as well. What are we looking at? I mean, Saskatchewan's had that point of pride of being a liberal free zone for quite some time now, but polls are getting really weird. Are they resurging in Saskatchewan at all?
No, not at all. No, not at all. What we're seeing is basically a blue wall, which is what it's been for quite some time. Even when you have massive liberal governments, you're still seeing this blue wall. There's only one riding the Liberals ever win, and it's way up north. And then there's only 14 ridings in the province, and basically the Liberals win one, and the other 13 go Conservative.
So what are the top issues people are looking at? What is it in Saskatchewan then that are keeping everybody in that blue wave right now?
Obviously resource, because quite often policies from that do with policy.
We're getting some sound issues from you there, Chris. Let me see if we can tune that a little on our end or something.
Sure.
It's an echo. I'm not sure what we can do about that. It's been a frustration today. You're not the first person hit with it.
How about I'll log out and come back in and see what happens.
We'll give that a try. It wasn't. Yeah, it's worth a crack.
All right. I'll try it again.
Great, thanks. So yes, Saskatchewan has been, I guess, this bastion of conservative support. It means more so than Alberta. Even though Saskatchewan brought in a NDP government for a while, they were a pragmatic NDP government. You got to give them that. I mean, Romano balanced the budget. We're going back a ways. They get that prairie socialists out there with Saskatchewan, and then some support for the NDP sometimes. But all the same, the last few years they have been admirably, solidly conservative, and we'll see if that's going to change that time around. So I see Chris is kind of back in. Let's see if that's a little better, and we get a little more clarity in things. How are you doing there, Chris?
I'm well. Is the audio fixed now?
The commenters will let us know very quickly if it isn't. Okay, appreciate that. So, I mean, maybe to start with, though, agriculture, of course. I mean, it's a prime industry in Saskatchewan right now. And, the Liberals haven't traditionally been very friendly with the agricultural sector. Does you imagine that's a factor right now?
Yeah, particularly with the Chinese tariffs, because canola is one of the biggest crops here in Saskatchewan. And there's presently 100% tariff on our canola, which was China retaliating for our putting 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, which you can't even find one on the roads of Saskatchewan. So I'm not exactly sure where all these Chinese EVs we had to stop coming into the country are from, and where they're driving around. But it's the canola producers in particular in the province are quite concerned. And then also there's a lot of pork producers in Manitoba. They're also concerned as well, because they also got slapped with the same 100% tariff on pork products, which we export a lot to China as well.
So something has been kind of, I got to admit, I was a bit frustrated with too, though. I mean, these trade wars, there's just no winners when we do these things. No. I think there's things we can point at, but I think Trump's approach with Canada was pretty out of the blue and unjustified. I mean, he's got issues to be upset with, fair enough, but these crazy 25% tariffs are a little much. But in the case of the EVs, Canada brought that on themselves. Like we put that tariff on Chinese goods and invited the retaliation, but I'm not hearing a single politician saying they're going to get rid of that either.
No, I mean, Premier Scott Moe is was calling on Carney even prior to the election that he needed to call President Xi and talk about this because one, there was nothing from the Trudeau government about trying to stop these Chinese tariffs on the canola and pork. And it also affects Atlantic Canada too, because they put it on seafood as well, for example. So it's not just an issue in Western Canada where Trudeau just ignored Western Canada, didn't really care about helping them economically. He was only concerned in the central part of the country and Atlantic Canada. But Mo repeatedly even called on Carney before he called the election on Sunday to even be like reach out, like this needs to stop. We're coming up on planting season, and our farmers need to know what they can plant and what they're going to make money off of, because you can't make money off of when you have these massive tariffs, because it makes your product too expensive, and then they go buy someone else's product.
Well, something though, to be fair with things, and that's where I find myself frustrated, though I'm not hearing Scott Moe calling out Poilievre and saying, Mr. Poilievre, are you going to commit to getting rid of these tariffs? Like, nobody's holding his feet to the fire either, and he's sort of kind of dodging on this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically right now, Pierre has no power to actually affect anything over the next, 4 weeks or so.
No, but now would be the time you make that promise.
Now would be the time to get up. And I mean, he is going to be in Manitoba tomorrow, I believe, doing a press conference. So maybe he will touch on farming issues due to the fact that the tariffs are basically hitting Manitoba and Saskatchewan really hard, the ones from China. Not to mention the U.S. buys most of our potash. So those tariffs are going to affect us here immensely. Plus, we ship a lot of oil, obviously not as much as Alberta ships. But we do still have quite a big oil business in this province. Not to mention, the U.S. needs our uranium to run their nuclear reactors. And we're just about to open up another uranium mine here. And basically, American companies have already been the buyers of uranium that hasn't even come out of the ground yet. And that's going to get slapped with a tariff as well. And it's going to make everything more expensive for Americans, because all of a sudden their energy is going to cost more. The farmers' inputs are going to be more because of the tariffs on potash, and oil will go up because most of the oil in Canada, we don't have refineries here anymore, really. So all of our stuff gets shipped down to the States to be refined and then used in the US. So all of those things are going to make life more expensive for the average American, because potash goes into farming, which goes into food. You've got oil and gas also getting nailed with tariffs, and then you've got uranium getting nailed with tariffs. So their energy costs are going to go up.
Well, it's getting scary on every front. Now, one of the things, he's been questioned on it and he dodged on it. He wouldn't answer. But Carney said he hasn't ruled out putting export tariffs on Western resources, whether it's Albertan oil, gas, or the potash coming out of Saskatchewan. That's got to be getting people pretty concerned as well. I mean, again, potash is a brilliant, industry, and Saskatchewan is one of the biggest providers of that in the world. Mm-hmm. But if you're prime customer, you suddenly hit them with a 25% price increase, we're going to see some trouble real fast.
Especially when you look at the deal that Trump made with Russia this week, where he has basically said that as long as, Russia goes by the Ukrainian war peace deal, where Ukraine wasn't even involved in the negotiations, that he will restore the agricultural and fertilizer markets for Russia. So in one way, we're getting hit with tariffs by the U.S. On, for example, potash, but then the president of the United States goes and helps Russia sell their potash. So it's almost like America's allies became their enemies, and their enemies have now become their allies, because it's completely frustrating for people in Saskatchewan when they see policies like this. This was debated in the legislature this week several times about the issues with Donald Trump and making the deal with Russia, because due to the fact that Russia had those sanctions, it made Saskatchewan basically the only place on the planet where you could get potash. And if Belarus and Russia open back up, the potash price will go down. which obviously affects natural resource revenues for the government here in Saskatchewan. Not to mention that we do now have some international customers, and they are trying to diversify who buys our potash. So, for example, Brazilian farmers need our potash. So that some of our potash now goes to Brazil. But the other problem is that the fertilizer that Canadian farmers need comes from the States, and the fertilizer American farmers needs comes from Canada. So if we're taxing each other's fertilizers with tariffs, duties, levies, whatever you want to call them, the input costs are going to go up for farmers on both sides of the border. And that's another big issue. And as a matter of fact, grain growers this week were talking about this as being a major issue because 90% of the fertilizer the Canadian farmers buy is from the U.S.
Well, and that's, it highlights just unfortunately the self-defeating nature of trade wars and how it just hurts everybody. Pretty much like any kind of war, I guess, in that sense. A commenter, Clinton DeVoe, brought up a good point. And I know Clinton's spoken on this a lot before with Wab Kinew in talking about the Deepwater Port in Churchill, expanding that. We're talking about utility corridors or perhaps, increasing rail capacity or ability or shipping ability there. Has that been much in discussion that you've been seeing in Saskatchewan and Manitoba?
It has been very recently in particular. Both the Sask Party and the NDP have both called for pipelines going in every direction, meaning one up to Churchill, more going to the west, more going to the east, and then also twinning the Trans-Canada Highway so that we can get stuff to the ports to go to countries other than the U.S. Scott Moe keeps saying that once all this is over and everything shakes out, the U.S. will still be our largest trading partner. But Saskatchewan's economy is the most diverse in terms of the exports compared to any other province. 45% of our exports go to countries other than the U.S., and only 55% go to the U.S. So we are in some ways protected a bit here in Saskatchewan compared to other provinces that rely more heavily on American trade. And part of that has been the Sask Party since they came into power, and they have been opening up trade offices around the world, and they now have 9 trade offices around the world that help facilitate selling Saskatchewan, particularly potash, and a lot of our farming agricultural exports as well around the world.
We get markets like India, for example, has been a fantastic developing market. A lot of Canadian lentil products go to India. They've been a large customer. Diversifying our customer base, I think people are finally realizing the importance of that. And Saskatchewan's been doing so. It's been interesting watching Scott Moe, though. I mean, he's not getting into the soup as much as Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith when she tries to talk directly to the USA and she's being villainized for it. Mr. Moe is staying in the background somewhat.
Yeah, he's had several trips to Washington this year already to try and deal with the issues around Donald Trump. Luckily for Saskatchewan and Alberta as well, and Manitoba, is that a lot of senators, governors from the Midwest are now in the Trump administration. So there's already established relationships that Scott Moe had with them. And I'm sure Danielle Smith probably had the same relationships because we're all basically right around the same area of the country and who we deal with on the other side of the border. And so he has, and actually just today, he's gone over to Europe actually to try and sell more of our stuff into Europe as well. I think all the premiers Trudeau's been a lame sitting duck through the entire Liberal leadership race, and the premiers had to take diplomacy on by themselves for that time period. And because of that, the premiers had to make trips to Washington to talk with people in commerce in the White House, et cetera. And that has, from what we're seeing coming out of the White House, not had much effect. Maybe once we get through this election and we have someone has like a 4-year mandate, which is what we expect in Canada in terms of the length that we have between our federal elections, that we will have a prime minister that will be able to deal directly with Trump for the rest of Trump's term. And the other thing with Trump is someone has to replace him because this is his second term. So we have to deal with Trump for 4 years. And then after that, who knows who we're going to deal with. But we're barely 2 months in. And in some ways, you can't fault Trump for trying to protect American industries. However, I don't think he realizes how much over the last 50, 60 years, the economies between Canada and the US have been integrated.
No,
For example, like in the auto industry, for example, like it's so integrated that parts, like cars are going over the border, 200-300 times before they're completely assembled.
Yeah, you can't separate.
You can't separate that. It's almost like there is absolutely no border between Ontario and Michigan and Ohio.
So I guess we'll just kind of turn a little and look into Winnipeg then, in that area. You're kind of closest, and I know you watch things out there. There's a few ridings definitely in play out there. How do you see that developing as this federal election goes? I mean, we got, Saskatchewan's pretty solid where they're sitting, but Winnipeg, they're kind of a swing province. Manitoba,
yeah, well, Manitoba as a whole is leaning liberal right now. It'll be interesting to see once we get another couple of weeks into the election what the polls are doing. I still think the polls are a little high for the Liberals. I think Carney is still on his honeymoon of becoming the Liberal leader, just like we see a bump after leadership conventions, party conventions, all of those sorts of things. There's artificial bumps that go up and then they go back down. It'll just depend on what happens between now and the election. But definitely Manitoba has a lot more ridings that you would call in play or could swing one way or the other, particularly in urban settings in Manitoba, in Winnipeg in particular, in Manitoba.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of getting outside of the election issue, but everything impacts it and so on. I've seen stories coming out from out your way. The overdoses, the addiction epidemic, the fentanyl, everybody's dealing with that everywhere around the entire bloody world. I mean, it's just a horrific drug with what it's doing. But it's starting to spike again out there, it appears to be.
Yes, we have a bad batch of fentanyl that's been circulating up in Saskatoon area and a little bit into Prince Albert now. It is deadly. Normally when you take fentanyl, particularly the street version, it hits you pretty quick. You're feeling the effects 15, 20, 30 seconds, 1 minute. But the batch that's going around now, and it's a burgundy red color, it takes like 15 minutes to kick in. So people take some and they don't think they took enough because nothing's happening. And then they take more and more and more. And by the time you get to the 15-minute mark and it kicks in, you're well on your way to an overdose. And to make it even worse, it's taking 4 or 5 shots plus oxygen to revive people. This is a very, very bad, because they're taking so much. It's a very, very bad situation in Saskatoon. They had to open an emergency center. The provincial government did to coordinate all the emergency services specifically around overdoses. And actually the Prairie River Harm Reduction, which is it's a federally funded safe injection site. I don't like using the word safe injection site because there's no safe way to inject drugs into your body. But it was federally funded, and they've actually closed down because their staff is exhausted. And 2 Saskatoon libraries in the downtown area have also closed down for a month because they were having multiple overdoses every single day in the library because people are going into the washrooms there and shooting up. It just became, it wasn't a library anymore. So they had to shut it down.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, people, they don't blame the staff, for not wanting to deal with it. You sign up to be a librarian, not a social worker or a paramedic or a police officer. It's a difficult role that they get put into, but it
Very
really
difficult.
highlights just how terribly acute this problem's been becoming. What about border control? I mean, that was something that I think most people kind of agree that was a pretense on the trade war. There's been issues of stuff crossing the border, but that wasn't the real base issue for things, but it's still something worthy of addressing. Mm-hmm. Has there been improvement or more news on the border control with southern Saskatchewan?
Yes, they've put, basically they took a lot of the conservation officers who would normally be looking for people fishing illegally and things like that, and putting them more onto searching for people coming across the border. because the border between Saskatchewan and the U.S. I mean, there's a couple crossings, but I mean, you could be in a farmer's field and not know if you're in Canada or the U.S. It's it's not like a border you drive up to and there's a fence or anything. So a lot of the conservation officers have been switched to dealing with the drug trade, and they've taken some of the highway patrol as well as some of the RCMP and put them as close to the border as they can. There are some issues between the Canadian Border Security Agency and the RCMP on how close they can go to the border in the province, which I found was kind of weird because I would think you would be able to go basically up to the border, but there's actually there's 3 kilometers within the border they're not allowed to go into or something, which is weird, but whatever. And they're also using drones as well. And there has been a significant uptake in the seizures of illegal drugs, not just coming across the border, but across the province as well. And it's part of the Sask Party's 2-step process to deal with the fentanyl crisis. They're going after the supply, which is the dealers, but we've added 500 addictions beds across the province. About half right now are operational, with the other half will be operational by the end of the year, so that they're dealing with both the people who are addicted to these drugs to get them off the drugs and then back into society where they can work a normal job, etc. And they're also dealing with the criminals who are coming in and bringing these poisonous substances. There's no other way to describe it. You're injecting poison into your body, and dealing with stopping that. And I'm pretty sure that you will continue to see these busts because they have expanded their drug units in the major cities and stuff as well.
Great. Well, it's before I let you go, then, I mean, you're quite prolific. You're always giving us great coverage from out there. Are there a couple of stories you've got on the go you want to kind of let people know about?
Yeah, we had a story come out yesterday. The privacy commissioner here in Saskatchewan, there was some parents that asked for some information on gender identity and transgender clubs, education, etc., in public schools, like kindergarten to grade 8. And when they got the stuff back, it was heavily redacted, and a lot of things were just simply withheld for lawyer-client privilege. I guess there seems to be lawyers in every classroom in this province. And the privacy commissioner gave the strongest rebuke he has ever given to anyone to Regina Public Schools. He ordered thousands of pages to be turned over. And he's even asked to speak with the person who redacted the pages that did get turned over, because there was pages where the only thing you could see was the date and the rest was just blacked out. So even they turned over 10% of what they should have. The other 90 they didn't hand over. And the 10% they did hand over was heavily redacted. It was basically useless. And the privacy commissioner said, look, these parents deserve to know what's going on in the schools. And on top of that, some of it was actually about communication between the parents and the school. And they even redacted the parents' emails to the school, which they already had. They wanted to know that, like, was it shared internally in the school board? So that's a story is up right now on our site. But that is the major story hitting Saskatchewan today.
Great. Well, yeah, I appreciate it. You cover those stories. And again, the legacy media outlets are ignoring it. I mean, nobody wants the state getting between them and their kid. It's not a left-right thing. It's your right as a parent to know what's happening in there. And it's pretty disturbing how hard the bureaucracy will work to keep parents from knowing what's actually going on with their unbloody children.
Yeah, one of the parents, for example, for 2 years, their kid, who was in grade 1 and 2 at the time, was participating in a gender identity lunch club at school.
Yeah.
And they blocked all the information about it. Like for someone in grade 1 and 2, we're talking like 6 and 7-year-olds, 2 years in a lunch club, talking about gender identity and what gender are you and all this stuff. And the parent didn't even find out until the kid said something about this lunch club that they were in and started talking about something they talked about in that lunch club. And the school even tried to hide that.
Yeah, parents trying to find out, and then they redact the
Yeah.
information. Well, I appreciate you keeping on them there, Chris, and for watching things out there in the Saskatchewan and the Plains in general for us. So I'll let you get back to it, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks very much, Cory. Have a great day.
Great, thanks, Chris. So yeah, that is our Saskatchewan and by default Manitoba bureau chief covering things out there. And Chris hits some great stories. Keep an eye on there. He's been fantastic. He's been with the Standard for quite some time there at westernstandard.news. We've got people across the country covering these things. We got common issues that are happening in every province, and then there's stuff that's unique to different areas. Particularly when we get in the West. So looking into some of the comments, I think I saw it was from Louise. We'll kind of back up a bit, when we're talking about the trade agreements, the challenges, and she mentioned, we need Mexico, the United States, and Canada all sit down and hash out an agreement. Yes, that makes perfect sense, but the problem is we had one. In fact, prior to that, we had NAFTA, and Trump, in his first term, said NAFTA is horrible. We got to get rid of NAFTA. We got to rip up NAFTA. It's an awful deal. So we did. We ripped up NAFTA and sat down Mexico and Canada, the United States, and they drafted a whole new trade agreement. And literally Trump was up there going on about that when it was signed. And this is the best trade agreement ever written. This is we're going to be the strongest economy in the world. We got the Canada, US, Mexico agreement. I've done this. Well, now Trump gets in again. He said, and he ripped that agreement up. And he said, no, this agreement's crap. Who signed this? You did, you crazy Cheeto. But he changed his mind. That's the problem with dealing with him. You don't know where he's going to come from. The man is not consistent, to say the least. So how does any leader deal with him when the goalposts bounce around faster than you can keep up with him? Part of our issue, though, a big problem, and Chris mentioned that in a sense, was that we haven't had, though, somebody who's been a prime minister with a mandate for a long, long time. I mean, Parliament was pretty much shut down since last fall. Trudeau was completely ineffective, disrespected, and just of no use. Trudeau finally stepped aside. We didn't even have a Liberal leader for weeks. Now, okay, we get Carney, who's been elected by the Liberals, but not Canadians yet. Nobody's in a position of authority to bind Canada to a long-term agreement of any kind yet, and that won't happen until after this election, whoever might end up being the prime minister. And it's getting kind of scary to say the least, to see what might be happening at the end of this. So some of the torqued dialogue. I mean, I don't know how to speak to or respond to a lot of things we see. So in Alberta, I was listening, a lot to the news today. I torture myself with legacy media. But Danielle Smith, Premier Smith, went down and spoke at a PragerU event in Florida, and she was on a panel with Ben Shapiro. This is the beauty of legacy media. They get up and they interview a political scientist. I won't even name which one. It doesn't matter anymore. And she goes on about Smith was sitting down and associating with known racists. Really? It just starts getting exhausted. Can you guys get a new friggin' playbook? Ben Shapiro, PragerU, whatever you might like, they're conservative. There's no doubt about that. But they aren't the fringe. They're describing it as if she was sitting with Klan members or far, far fringe or way out there. Guys, they're pretty bloody mainstream. You don't have to agree with where they're sitting, but those two alone, between Shapiro and Prager, they reach more conservative Americans than 10 CNNs will. So, and again, you could... it's fair critique to say Smith is overstepping her authority. Maybe she shouldn't be down there meddling in things, particularly when there's a federal election going. That's a fair enough discussion to be had. And, some people could say she's doing more damage than good. Maybe, maybe not. But to go straight into that, she's associating with racists. Oh, God, I'm sick to death of it. I'm sick of it. Unless you see real evidence of that happening. Real evidence. Let's get off that narrative. Isn't that what we all kind of got sick of? Isn't that part of why Trudeau's support went down to 17%? People were tired of the woke garbage going on, where people were tired of everything being labeled as racism no matter what happens. But we're still there. We're still there. And is it working? I don't know. So getting back to, I meant to ask Chris about that, but that's fine. There's a degree of independence type sentiment going on in Saskatchewan and Alberta too. And as I did mention with him, Carney won't rule out using Alberta's oil and gas, Saskatchewan's potash, things like that, as tools to weaponize in fighting the trade war. Well, wait a minute. Those aren't your tools to be had. Those are provincial jurisdiction. But you know, Canadians watch that. You know, not enough people realize even where those levels are. If anybody's going to go into that, it needs to be provincial doing it. But trade wars, they're just so destructive, foolish, and dumb. People got to understand. I mean, I think it was Kenzie who pointed out Trump did campaign on tariffs. He's never made a secret of that. And if anything, the Republicans have always been worse for protectionism than the Democrats when it comes to that. But just because he campaigned on it doesn't mean it's still not stupid. And it seems to be showing. Trump is there rattling the cage and shaking the trees and going on with these tariffs, but he keeps bringing it to the edge and then backing off. He took $4 trillion out of the North American markets just because of the instability of threatening these things has caused. And what's it done? How much business has moved into the United States? How much has he really brought home? As Chris pointed out, because that's what Trump keeps going on about. We're going to bring all the auto manufacturers to the USA. It doesn't happen overnight there, Zippy. It's not that easy. They're very integrated. The parts for some vehicles come from over here, and the assembly is over there. Because we've had good, cooperative, integrated economies that served both countries well, or all three even, because there's stuff down in Mexico going on. All these tariffs are going to do is shoot up the price of automobiles for everybody in the United States. It's going to be nuts. Kenzie's saying he's made $1 trillion in investments. Well, that's fine, but he blew out $4 trillion. And what are investments from the government? Well, that's money taken from the citizens. And I've heard some people talking about, Trump's grand plan is he's going to get rid of income tax because he's going to make all the money out of tariffs. Oh, okay. Don't listen to Trump. Listen to economists. Please. Listen to Friedman, Milton Friedman, because he dealt with that so much when there was protectionism, when the Japanese market was getting so strong in the past. We're talking the 80s and 90s, but the issues were the same. The Japanese... just a second. Kenzie Kraken saying $4 trillion out of the U.S. What? Yes, that's how much market capital got blown out of the markets when they crashed after Trump started this whole tariff talk. The markets haven't come close to recovering from that yet. Because when you throw instability into the market, people pull their investments. Gold shot through the roof, but market value on a whole pile of things went into the toilet. That's money that evaporated, value that evaporated, just over him shaking things up. And how are you going to tariff yourself rich? That's what annoys me with some of the selective listening that some people do. Are you conservatives or not? Well, if you are, then you should oppose the concept of taxing yourself rich. And Trump is claiming he can tax everybody to prosperity. He's claiming through tariffs, somehow he can get rid of income tax. Guys, look at the numbers. It's not even close. Plus, if the tariffs are to be effective, theoretically, and he drives everything internal, no longer will there be much of imported goods coming into the United States any longer. Okay, fine. Well, then where's the money going to come from for the rest of your programs? Because people aren't buying it anymore. You're not collecting on the tariffs. Look, guys, it's dumb economics. People keep saying he's got some grand plan. He's playing 4D chess. Well, no, I think one of the best concepts I saw from somebody saying, no, everybody else is trying to play chess. Trump's playing bingo. He's not even in the same realm as everybody else. You don't know how to negotiate. I'm tired of people making excuses for it. You've got to show an end game. You got to show a goal. People saying it's brilliant negotiating. Well, fine, but negotiating for what? Because he still hasn't said what he's asking for yet. Meanwhile, we're all running around like chickens with our heads cut off, and everybody's suffering from it, Canadians and Americans alike. And that's one of the things that pisses me off the most out of this, because I do love the United States. I love the Americans. And look at what they're doing to our relationship. And look what they've done to the Canadian electoral landscape. Carney is benefiting from this. He's riding high because people see him as a picture of stability. Somehow, I don't know how they're seeing it, but they are seeing it. So Mavros, a commenter, saying, but the U.S. economy is going to suffer too, isn't it? How are they going to keep going with the U.S. economy suffering? That's a good question. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't know what the grand plan is here. even if, as Trump lectures on, that we're just suddenly, Mexico and Canada are just going to shut down all their auto manufacturing plants and just move them into the United States, how fast do you think that can happen? And it's not going to happen. They might shut down, but they're going to move down there. It's bizarre. We're in such strange, unprecedented, and ugly times. But I just get frustrated with conservatives who say, well, I'm conservative, so damn it, I have to support Trump. Well, you can support him on a lot of things he's doing. I like how he shook the establishment. I like how he's getting in there with a rotten system and trying to fix it up a bit. One of the things conservative, in a sense, was the Doge. I mean, cutting down the amount of bureaucracy and bureaucrats. Great. But don't try to pretend that tariff policies and protectionism are conservative policies. No, free trade is a conservative policy, not protectionism. And it's bad economics, and everybody's paying a bad price for it. Hopefully it gets rattled out. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of a bloody election where nobody wants to talk about something as nuanced as macroeconomics right now. So it's Kenzie Kraken saying, Carney's running his campaign as anti-Trump to a degree. Yeah, he is, and it's effective. Because again, left and right, the middle, the people who tend to swing in votes, they're ticked off. For the most part, they are not happy with this. They're not happy with it. And it's bloody well going to give us, when we thought we might have a chance of getting away from liberal governments a little while, back into liberal majority territory. So how can you celebrate what President Trump's been doing? And yeah, back to the fentanyl. I'll kind of hit on that. It's interesting. Now, let's talk about something else. Yeah, the fentanyl. We'll get on that. Because this whole thing was tipped off by saying that apparently it was pouring from Canada into the United States. Even American Senate committees now, they've been speaking and saying that no, it comes in from Canada a bit, but it's a tiny, almost insignificant amount. It's not become an issue. It's good to see, at least as Chris had mentioned, Old Corn, who we had on before, Saskatchewan has taken a treatment-based approach. You've got to hit both the supply and the demand. And particularly, that's part of it. I mean, the old just say no theories from back in the 80s, yeah, that didn't work with drugs in general because addicts don't just say no. Interdiction alone, going after the dealers, it's important, but it's not enough. You have to hit the demand because they're always going to find a way. Kenzie Kraken saying it's insignificant because they aren't catching it. Well, no, they're not catching all of it. No, that's part of it. It's flowing by on every side. But I mean, the amount coming from Canada versus the amount coming from Mexico is insignificant. Either way, as long as we got untreated addicts, they're going to find a way. They will bring it in through blimps if they have to. If there's demand for a product, people will get it to them. We want to make it harder for them to get it to them. I'm not talking about just opening the borders and letting it go. But we've really got to work on treatment and mental health supports for people because, again, as long as the demand is there, the drugs are going to be a problem on both sides of the border in every country in the world. That's part of the annoying aspect of this, too. No matter what's going on with the borders, you got to remember, it's the United States' responsibility under what comes into them, not the countries with what's going out. Everything's gone upside down. All right, let's go on to a nice, easy social issue, and that's First Nations issues, residential schools, something non-controversial and not complicated, and, bring down the tone of things a little bit. So we're going to talk to Frances Widows, and she's been on the show before, but it's been a while, and she's been fantastic and outspoken on this and isn't giving up. So I thank you for joining us today, Frances.
Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate it. So, everything's kind of getting overwhelmed issues-wise, and it's just been a world of madness lately. But we can't forget the whole residential school fiasco, beginning with Kamloops. It hasn't gone away. It's still a problem. And some people have paid some career prices for this, including yourself, for even speaking up on this. I guess to start with, you're going to be going to Powell River and speaking on this?
That's correct. On Sunday, March 30th, I'll be traveling to Powell River with my videographer, Simon Harrigot, who's a filmmaker in Kamloops, actually. We're planning on doing a documentary on the Kamloops case, and Powell River is connected to the Kamloops case because the name change process, which I've been following for a number of years, was actually fomented by the chief, John Hackett, who said because the 215 children have been found at Kamloops, there was people should not resist the his efforts to change the name of Pell River. So that was based upon false assumptions, and so Pell River has been impacted by this as well.
Yeah, it's just bizarre, and it's turned into a club that can be used against anybody. It seems on Indigenous issues, anything comes up, and you're immediately, well, you even if it's unrelated, we'll pull it in. Well, you're a residential school denier. We can't get reconciliation unless we accept the responsibility for this horrific mass murder. But it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have no evidence of remains at Kamloops, and it's highly improbable that there are no remains there, because not one parent has said that their child never came home from the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So if that is the case, who are the, not 215, because Sarah Bollier, after hearing about the archaeology department doing at Simon Fraser doing excavations in a particular area that she'd surveyed, and they didn't discover any remains, actually downgraded the 215 number to 200 possible remains or anomalies or targets of interest. But we need excavations. We need Bollier's report to be released, and we need excavations at Kamloops. $9.2 million was requested for ancestral excavations. Not one shovel has gone into the ground at Kamloops. So what was that, millions of dollars spent on in the Kamloops case?
Well, and the hypocrisy has been kind of exposed when we look at Winnipeg, where they were willing to spend tens of millions, possibly even to the hundreds of millions, to find 4 bodies of murdered Indigenous women, which is tragic and horrible, absolutely. And they did. They started digging. They actually found 2 of them. But this double standard where, okay, expense is no limitation when it comes to recovering the remains of Indigenous people, when it comes to a Winnipeg landfill, yet where allegedly we have 200 children's bodies buried in Kamloops, we can't dig 6 feet.
Yes, and it's not a complicated excavation. They have dug in the basement of the Pine Creek, in the Pine Creek case, in the church basement. There were supposed to be 14 anomalies that were found there, and the elders and the knowledge keepers had said that there were rumors that children were buried in the church basement. They excavated that, and they found rocks in the church basement. That is a more difficult excavation because it's enclosed space than going to where the septic tiles were laid in the 1920s, which is a lot of the hits on Sarah Bollier's GPR machine were in that area. Don't even do the whole site. Just go in and do a plot where those septic tiles are laid and see if that's what the GPR machine picked up.
Yeah, if we could even just do a comparative, use of data on that. But again, they're very carefully making sure nobody can have access to that report to do such a thing. And it's really, I find it enraging. If people really care, if they're really concerned, you want the truth. You want to get down and find out what's going on in there. And you brought up something that not enough people talk about. If there were 200 children missing, and people say, oh, well, we wouldn't know from 100 and some years ago. No, the allegations are that this was happening in the 50s and 60s. Theoretically, the perpetrators might still be alive. There should be a record of some families saying, hey, my son or daughter disappeared, my cousin disappeared, my brother disappeared. There is zero, not a single person reported missing there.
Yes, and it seems to be the whole thing is based upon Kevin Annett, who was a defrocked United Church minister, who was spreading all sorts of tall tales and was interviewing people and discussing things on Vancouver's east side, people who, had serious substance abuse problems. And then it appears that many people have absorbed these kinds of these tales that Kevin Annett was spreading, and now it's just become part of the consciousness. But the Kamloops band, everyone says it should be up to them. This is what you hear the leadership saying. They received millions of dollars for excavations. If they're not going to excavate, that money should be returned to the government, because they did not use the money for what that money was supposed to be spent on. But we want the excavations to occur, so they should just do what it was that they were supposed to do between 2021 and 2023. That's when the funding was requested for, during that 2-year period. And we are now 2 years past that date.
Well, and something I have trouble with is when they say it should be up to the band. You know, if I'd said, hey, I found what I think is evidence of 6 bodies in the back 40 of my acreage, and I'm pretty confident there were murdered children buried there, but you know what? My faith says you can't dig there. Just take it at my word and leave it. Well, if the police felt for half a second there really were bodies buried in my property, nothing I could do would stop them from coming in and doing a forensic investigation. They're going to say, we got to get in here and see what happened. You don't just leave it up to the person who's sitting on the property to say whether or not the law is going to be enforced there or not. There's a mythical sovereign nation status that people put upon the First Nations that doesn't really exist. They're just overpowered municipalities in reality.
Yes, and if someone was murdered on the site now, it would just be, leave it up to the band to determine who's responsible for the murder that occurred. I don't think that's how the criminal justice system in Canada operates. And it's very important for that not to be the case, because small dependent groupings, which is what Indigenous groups are, that's a big mistake that's happened, is that because people have absorbed the language, they think that Indigenous groups are a nation similar to the province of Quebec. But the expertise, the resources, the numbers, the economic factors are not present there. And so you can't expect, groups of 1,000 people to be able to conduct very, very detailed criminal investigations. That's something for, at the least, the provincial governments to do, but generally it's with the RCMP, it's done federally.
Yeah, well, and I, as a Canadian citizen who's concerned, want to find out what happened there. I mean, if indeed you dig a hole and you find the remains of a child, I'll be mortified like anybody else, and then I want follow through. I want to find the families of those remains and have the remains returned to where they should be properly interred, and I want an investigation to find out how those remains ended up there, what happened to that child. I can't believe anybody would say we should just leave it alone now.
And they were not saying this. This is the other thing, is that in the Fifth Estate program that aired in January 2022, both Manny Jules and Ted Godfredson said that they were going to be conducting, I believe they used the word exhumations, but of course that's jumping the gun on the issue, because you only do exhumations if there are actually bodies there. So, but they were wanting to go and actually do the excavation work that might result in exhumation. So they both stated that on this program. Manny Jules said that the 13 family heads had agreed. So if that's the case, if the 13 family heads did agree, why has that not happened? And that was in 2022. So that was over, 3 years ago that this was being said.
Yeah, and it just has no end. The other part that's getting concerning now, and we're seeing pushes, they've been coming from the NDP, but there's been liberal support of it, to basically try to criminalize discussion of this issue. You and I, for even what we've said so far, under their definitions, could be charged. This reeks of cover-up, not caring about trying to find out what happened.
And it's authoritarianism generally. That's a big problem, is, speech should not be criminalized. If you're having discussions about historical events, in order to try to figure out what's true, people are going to make errors and they're going to say some things that are not true, but you need to have the discussion to be able to figure things out. And so what's occurring with this accusation of residential school denialism, which was manufactured by the University of Manitoba professor Sean Carlton, and it seems to have just been accepted by a whole bunch of people, including the MP Leah Gazan. is that, and I believe the definition that Carlton uses is misrepresenting facts to impede reconciliation. Well, Carlton has never stated what facts he is talking about, and what we're trying to do is correct the misrepresentation of facts, which has been made by the Kamloops Band on May 27, 2021, when they stated that the remains of 215 children had been found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And in spite of changing that to anomalies in 2024, Ted Gottfriedson and Dee DeRose at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops are on a video talking about the graves that have been found at Kamloops. That was in 2024. So these Indigenous neo-tribal elites continue to make the claim that there are these remains found, and what that allows to happen is it allows the Aboriginal industry to divert resources away from the much needed services that are required in Indigenous communities. You know, this is kind of the untold story, is that we have terrible deprivation in these isolated Indigenous communities. And by spending all this money on lawyers, consultants, and, you know, archaeologists who are running their GPR machines over all these places, when we have no evidence of missing children anyway, that means that money cannot be spent on what it needs to be spent on, which is improving the conditions in Indigenous communities.
Yeah, it's distracting from the real needs that are happening, because there are real, very serious and real issues with the First Nations in general. It's just madness. I appreciate your courage and still standing up and taking it on and pushing back. You know, that's the thing, is they tend to push people away. People get fearful, and then they leave the issue. You're stubborn, and I really do appreciate that, and I'm happy you're doing so. So before I let you go, where can people find what you're up to at Powell River and otherwise?
Yes, so there's a website called www.wokeacademy.info. I publish all my speaking engagements on that site. I'll be posting some materials today and tomorrow on, the Powell River situation. I also post many things on Facebook, and on Twitter at Woke Academy as well. So on social media, I try to keep people apprised of everything that's happening.
Great. Well, thanks, and I hope everything goes great in Powell River, and then please, keep up that good fight, and hopefully one day we'll get some actual resolution on what the hell happened over there.
Yes, and this is the 4th year anniversary coming up on May 27th, so we should be pressing hard for answers in the Kamloops case and not allow the band to be able to take millions of dollars and not do the excavations that they were supposed to have done between 2021 and 2023.
Absolutely. It's getting to the point of fraud now, to be honest. And I said as much in a recent column. It's time to start calling it out. So yes. Thank you very much again, and I'm certain we'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much, Cory.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, it's Frances Widos. And then again, if you just Google her name, you'll see what she's up to, and she is persistent. And we need to be on this. We do. And there's nothing worse than seeing, the efforts to gag and criminalize discussion. That, again, the authoritarianism of it. And what they've taken, and we got some cross things going on. Denialism. They very much want to make it seem as if it's like the same people who denied the Holocaust in World War II. And was pointed out, from Kenzie saying, well, haven't we criminalized discussion about the Holocaust? Some countries have. Canada's made it difficult. And, I find the people who, say it was a conspiracy, say it didn't happen and everything, vile. I find it tasteless, but I don't think it should be criminalized. Just expose people if they point out things like that. The difference with the Holocaust in World War II versus the Kamloops situation, evidence. And the evidence when it comes to the Holocaust, which again, I don't think we should criminalize discussion of it, but the evidence is pretty overwhelming. If anything else, it was actually, if you read up on those things, it says how horrifying, how meticulous record keeping was with the camps. And they took a picture, they literally put a tattoo on the wrist of every Jew with a serial number. That's how mechanized and sick this was. Thousands and thousands of soldiers liberating from Russia, from the United States, from Canada, came to these camps and saw and documented what was happening there. And something that was often found at those camps in holes and excavations through Ukraine as well with some of the mass murder sites was bodies. They found bodies. They dug them up. They were there. We don't have that with the residential school situation. There's no bodies. So to try and make a direct comparison is absurd. And to try and criminalize discussion and debate of it is just wrong. As Francis said, it's the authoritarianism we should get over. Free speech means listening to stuff you don't like hearing sometimes. It means listening to people who are wrong. It means listening to people who are offensive. It means listening to people that, yes, sometimes their words actually cause some damage. That's the price we pay for that important ability to speak to these issues. And I think it's getting more and more clear that they know there's no bodies there. It's pretty darn clear. If they thought, the people in the indigenous industry, Indian industry, I believe in Frances Pa's book, she wrote actually at length of that some years ago, very well. There's some people who make a very good living out of this. And they take in a lot of money. Advocates, lawyers, bureaucrats, all sorts of people are making out very well out of this. These bands are getting millions of dollars to investigate something they didn't actually do. And it's got to be called out. They don't want to be called out. If they really thought there were 200 bodies of children down there, the people, the race hustlers, the ones who are making money out of this, they'd be out there themselves with the shovels, bringing them up because they want them as trophies that they parade around so they can raise more funds for pushing back on the indignity and horror that was done. They don't think there's bodies down there. As Francis pointed out too, there was excavations done in another spot. They found nothing but rocks. Up by Edmonton, you don't hear much about that. The CBC, you Google it. I believe it was Shouldice Hospital it was called. There was allegations that were buried Native people in a lot out there, and they were going to be doing construction there. And the contractor actually did a bunch of ground penetrating radar studies around there and looked, and they found anomalies. So they did the whole excavation. They brought the elders out. They brought the whole works. And it was 30 some spots I think they dug. Didn't find a damn thing. Nothing. Because there was nothing there. And that's why they won't dig in Kamloops. This is an issue that's not going to come up in this election, you know. First Nations, that's a hot button. The most anything any politician, right, left, center is going to ever do is talk about spending more money. That's kind of our fault. We got to hold them a little more accountable, and we don't. We seem to vote for whoever spends the most and stays out of controversy. And you can bet that Polyev, none of them are going to touch any of that. Mavros pointing out some of the GPR shortcomings when it comes to geophysical anomalies, and that's the term, it's an anomaly. I worked in the Arctic for 4 winters up in the Mackenzie Delta. My job was actually processing ground penetrating radar data. We used it to measure ice thicknesses on the ice roads, and it's very effective for that. It's actually excellently effective for that because what it'll catch is differences in density. Ice has got a certain density, water's got a certain density. So when you get the refraction on the water through the ice, it's very clear and measurable. But even then, one of the things we had to do, as Mavros is mentioning as well, we'd have to go out now and then with augers and cut holes in the ice and with a stick, with the measuring stick underneath with a hook on it so we could find out and calibrate and make absolutely sure that our equipment was correctly measuring that ice thickness. You have to check. None of that has been done on the Kamloops site or any of these other GPR sites. Nobody's dug the hole to confirm, because you still have to dig the hole to confirm. All it shows you is a possibility. It shows you an anomaly. It shows you that the dirt in one part has a different density than the dirt in another. That could be because it was a grave that was dug up and filled in. Yes, it can. It could also be an old construction rock pile. It could also be a septic tile. It could also be a root bed from an apple tree because it was an old orchard where they did this. Until somebody digs a hole, we aren't going to know. And they're fighting their darndest to keep anybody from digging a hole on that site, while they're still saying we should spend tens of millions of dollars to look for bodies in a landfill in Winnipeg. Make up your minds, guys. Do you want to recover the bodies or not? Oh, well. That's enough on that, guys. I'm talking mostly about federal issues on this weekly show, but still, it's a federal issue, but it's not one that's going to come from the election, but I still like to talk about it. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for tuning in for things today, guys. Watch for other episodes. We're expanding our digital content all over the place. I have my regular show on Wednesday. Nigel Hannaford has his show coming out regularly. and we have the Pipeline Wednesday nights. Just keep supporting independent media. Keep watching us, sharing it, getting it so people don't tune into that legacy media. It's just giving you a bad picture out there. And send me feedback. I do appreciate it. We're all at the Western Standard, or find me on X. Of course, I'm very responsive on there. So thank you again for tuning in. Maybe we'll have something more positive to report on in week 2 of the election. We'll be watching it closely, and we'll go through all of that next Friday at this time.
What does success mean to you? Peace of mind? Financial freedom? Generational wealth? What do you see in your future? Investing in gold and silver can help you get there. Through our trading partners, New World Precious Metals offers safe, affordable, secure international accounts to help you meet your unique financial goals. Connect with one of our experienced team members. Invest in gold and silver today.